Here at this church. Pastor, thank you so much. I think you might have won a fan here with my mother. She said she's going to be coming back here. And, my mom had a sister, my Aunt Lois, who's now deceased, used to live in this community. So my mother drove up here. My mom's been in Atlanta now. Sister was a college student for the most part in the late 60s. And she said, she sends me, she walks into the church, she says, I know this church. She said, this church has been doing good work in this community for years. That's what she said. So I said to myself, I'm in the right place. If Mom sanctions it, I'm in the right place. So, thank you so much. And Kevin, thank you so much. And the leadership, Veterans for Peace, Debbie Clark, thank you so much. And also, I can't forget the lady my mom always talks about, Ann Money, this lady right here. Also, both of you, thank you so much. All right. To the Georgia Peace and Justice Coalition, I get it right? Peace and Justice Coalition, okay. Good stuff, thank you all. And just all of you, I know all of us justice advocates and activists and change agents in all aspects of our lives. I can tell just from coming in here and just any institution that puts the actual topic of racism on the forefront, on the front burner, and something that we should be struggling and fighting against and working with on an everyday basis. That's the kind of institution I want to be a part of. So consider me a member ad hoc. Like consider me an extended member in Norfolk. And every time I come back to Atlanta, I'm going to have to come back to this church. So thank you so much. Coming back to Atlanta has been good. I haven't been here in a little while. My mom says I visit infrequently, so I need to do a better job. So Mama, I just got motivated this weekend. But I was in church, and I was a member of Beulah Baptist Church as a child over there in Southwest Atlanta. And one of the things about church, and it wasn't until I got older that I realized that everyone didn't get church the same way. I came up in that focus called the social gospel. And so it was this focus of church and Christianity being linked to the least of these, which is the focus of this church, where I can see definitely from all the programs I hear about. What my mother said this morning, in the sense of being focused on the least of these, meaning that, it's not enough to talk about the so-called hereafter, what's coming after this life, if you're not focusing on what you're doing right here, right now for somebody else. Okay? And not just enough, to really help somebody, or to give a hand to someone, or to give someone a meal, to give someone something to wear. And all those things are good, and we should be doing those things. But to also struggle with the question of why we even live in a society where we have to do those things. Why do we live in a society where health care and housing and proper education, not just proper education, but adequate education from K all the way through PhD, if that's what you want to do, is not something that's accessible to all and equal and just to all. To struggle over the question. Exactly, that's how Dr. King said, it's not enough to fling a coin to a beggar. One must ultimately struggle over the question of why we live in a society that produces that. Okay, so that's the social gospel that I got. The social gospel that I got, talk about the story of a little shepherd boy named David, who slew the big Philistine giant Goliath, right? It was a gospel that talked about peace. The Beatitudes, blessed are the peacemakers. It was a social gospel that ultimately got us to look internally within ourselves. When you see somebody else, and some of us do it, and we have to struggle with that, and you make a judgment of someone. You may say, well, that person is deserving of this, or that person needs punishment, this person needs that. That it was Jesus that challenged us. Thou without you were without sin. Cast the first stone, right? It was a gospel that talked about the story of Moses, the liberator, freeing his people from bondage. It was a gospel that talked about the actual faith. I remember that Sunday school story of Meshach, and Abednego, right? And the story of actual faith and the willingness to die because of that which you believe in. Not that you want to die, but ultimately you will if you have to in order to live out a principle that you believe in. And so it's this social gospel that I believe is a social gospel of looking at a young Jesus and how he was born. It's interesting. It was Howard Thurman, former dean of the Howard University Divinity School, wrote a book in 1950. I'm sure some of you have read. It's called Jesus and the Disinherited. And it ultimately looks at, what is Jesus connection to the disinherited, to the disenchanted, to the desperate, to the damned, to the despised, to those who are on the margins of society. And to think that a book even had to be written to even speak of that, because ultimately what had happened and Howard Thurman talks about is that at that time, as we see now in the current Iraq conflict, and I'm glad that his church makes that a cornerstone of his ministry, that ultimately the rulers have taken that Jesus, born in a manger, wasn't even born in a house, they couldn't even find a room for him, right? A Jesus literally born homeless, okay? And have taken that Christ and have now somehow activated it to justify crimes against humanity, right? Somehow have taken a Jesus, that Jesus, and have now used to justify an occupation of the entire country, right? Have taken that Jesus and have somehow, justified, actual resources being used against people and for bombs and destruction against mankind, right? So that's the social gospel I came up in. Is that social gospel that compels me and moves me to this very day that I speak. All right, and I linked that to the own history of my mom. People ask me all the time. They say, where does your I was on a radio station. I was on a radio show one time. They said, the lady, she's about in her early 50s, and she said, you talk like an old man. That's what she said to me. She said, you talk like an old man. She said, where is that concept? Well, I said, as far as I can remember, as far as when my son is here, he's 8 years old right here. But from the time I was 8 and even younger, these are the kinds of conversations my mother would have with me. I wasn't one of those kids that went to nursery school at 2 and 3 years old. I was somewhat fortunate that my dad, who had his own business, made enough money where my mom could stay at home with me. So when I'm at home, playing my toys, I can hear my mom watching the news, and I can hear on the telephone, excuse my language, cursing out the Atlanta Daily World and then endorsing Ronald Reagan for president. I can hear my mom, talking about Watergate and Nixon, and just my mom talked about it. She was always talking about social justice type issues, but not only talking about, but also talking about her own connection to them. My mother was a college student at Clark College in the late 60s, now Clark County University. And it was at that time, even before then, that she came into her own consciousness. So, when you're a child growing up, some of you parents know this, when you tell stories to your children, they can actually envision what you're talking about. They can see it, So my mom's telling me about the struggle when she was in high school to integrate city buses in Chattanooga, Tennessee. She's telling me about this struggle, and I can see it in my own mind, She's telling me about how when she was in college and she first heard a young Stokely Carmichael. And of course my mama characterized me as crazy. But what she called crazy, I actually loved it. I actually had a chance to bring him to Howard University 6 months before he passed. But as she's talking about it, I can see it in my own mind. And so it's from these earlier times, my mother who sat in Ebenezer Baptist Church when Dr. King gave, and it's interesting that now the history is documented as him having given that speech at Riverside Church in New York in April. But we know he gave his speech 2 months earlier in Ebenezer, Atlanta, his speech against the Vietnam War, stating that a country that year after year would put billions of dollars into programs of military defense and not programs of social uplift would die what he called a spiritual death. And it is that same paradox, that same structural malfunction that we deal with today. So it's from these earlier times that I began to develop an ideology, if you will. You couldn't live in this city and I feel, and not be touched somehow by the movement. You can choose to ignore it if you want to, but you ride down these streets with these certain names of certain people who have given their lives in the struggle. You go by certain monuments, you drive by certain schools. You're going to get touched by that movement. So it was in that context, in that construct here in this city, that the movement touched me. And I went to Howard University in 1995 and was able to get involved in that movement and in that struggle on a host of issues. It was upon President Howard. It's interesting when I think about it. Somebody was showing me something about the V.I. Fuji Mall over there, the famed former death row inmate who they're now fighting to put him back on death row. Can you imagine that? But I spent most of my late 90s going to Philadelphia almost every weekend, marching for the needs, because that was a case that became, a case for my generation, one that we can link on to, not